net migration in 2024 was nearly 1 million people. To put it in context, you're a country of 340 million people. We're a country of just under 70 million people. That's a huge burden to put on the infrastructure of our country. We have a lot of Muslims in Britain.
In Birmingham on Monday, Muslims did take matters into their own hands. Some carried weapons.
But inevitably, the more people you have from any community, the more issues you're going to have.
If you were Prime Minister, what would you do?
Public tolerance of wokeism is massively collapsing. Sydney Sweeney. What's happened to Sydney Sweeney since that attempt to cancel her? She's only got infinitely more famous. The public in Britain view wokeism has markedly shifted in the last 4 years. Twice as many people now think that wokeism is a slur, not something as a badge of honour. I think we're going to be playing whack-a-mole with wokeism for a while yet. Mr. Mamdani is one of them. He's never done anything really other than he is dynamic, he is charismatic, and he can pull people along. He's a populist wokey. But we know that doesn't work. There's nowhere in the world you can point to where socialism actually can work. And I've seen criticism of my show where people say you're the Jerry Springer of political debate because you just want people fighting all the time. It's not true. I don't like it when it becomes too much of a circus.
Piers, you making your money, brother. Go on and make your money, man.
So what is it about him that you don't like?
Tommy Robinson. Come on, you and me, one-on-one. There's a reason you don't want to do it because you know that I will ask tricky questions.
Piers Morgan.
Hey, Rubin.
Here we go. We have two interviewers, and I'm going to interview you, although you never know. You could flip it on me at any moment, so anything could happen here.
Last time I was in Miami,
yes.
I was interviewing a serial killer for a crime documentary. I'm getting a very similar vibe.
Yeah. Well, as you
so
know,
at any moment, you might try and lunge at me.
I am noted as like the serial murderer of interviewers. So, no, I'm glad to see you. Obviously, we've done each other's shows many, many times. Yeah. There's plenty of things we agree on, disagree on. I want to kind of dive in on everything. But first, let's talk about the book for a moment because it's called Woke is Dead. And I was thinking it's an interesting title at this moment because it seems to me in New York right now, woke has just come back in the most nefarious, almost final form way, the combination of kind of woke and Islamism and communism and all that stuff. And then on the other side of it, Trump has eliminated a lot of woke. So tell me about sort of where the title came from and what do you make of...
Well, it's more an aspiration, if I'm honest. I make the point in the book. I don't actually think it's dead yet. I think we're going to be playing whack-a-mole with wokeism for a while yet. There are a lot of people who haven't got the memo. Mr. Mamdani is one of them. But I do think the public tolerance of wokeism is massively collapsing. I mean, look at Sydney Sweeney, right, for example. As we're talking, she gave an interview to GQ. A GQ interviewer.
We'll put her boobs up on B-roll.
Right. Yeah. And the GQ interviewer clearly wanted her to apologise for the jeans ad. And Sydney Sweeney was having none of it. What's happened to Sydney Sweeney since that attempt to cancel her over that ad? She's only got infinitely more famous and more successful. That's an example of what I mean by woke being dead. 2-3 years ago, she might well have been cancelled. Now, people are standing up going, I've had enough of this. And actually, anybody else who stands up to it, I'm going to support them. Whether it's through buying their albums or going to their movies or whatever. I'm seeing a lot more of that. In England, a survey came out today, actually, reported in the Times of London. And it showed that the way the public in Britain view wokeism has markedly shifted in the last 4 years. So there's twice as many people now think that wokeism is a slur, not something as a badge of honour. Yeah. So it was 24% thought that in 2020. Now it's 48%. Again, you're just seeing a rising tide of the way people view wokeism as now something that's more of a slur than it was something to be proud of being.
What do you make of the Mamdani version of it, that we went from woke, like all the gender nonsense and everyone's racist and all that stuff, which I'm completely with you. The political correctness around that has largely shattered, but that now it has sort of burst forth into what its end game was, which was really socialism or Marxism or whatever, communism, whatever you want to call it.
In a way, you're seeing a battle with the heart and soul of the Democrats, I think, looking at it from the outside. New York is a Democrat city. The only two candidates who could possibly have won that were both Democrats. One's a moderate, Cuomo, and one's obviously progressive, far left, brazen socialist, Mamdani. I think a lot of it was a bad choice of candidate on the moderate side. We have the same thing in the UK. That's why Sadiq Khan keeps being elected as mayor of London, because the Conservatives keep putting up absolute doofuses against him. I think you could say the same. I think Cuomo was was damaged goods, shouldn't have been the candidate against him on the moderate side. The other winners for the Democrats, interestingly, that night were mainly moderates, not the progressive left. So you're seeing somebody who is dynamic. He's very charismatic. He's very dynamic. He has never run a whelk stall. Are you familiar with whelk stalls?
No, so but he's never run anything, so I'll go with you on
London,
that.
They sell whelks. They're like little cockled eels, right? He's never even run one of those. It's like a joke we do in England, right? He's not even run a whelk stall. Right. Actually quite hard to run a whelk stall. But he's never run anything. He's never done anything really other than he is dynamic, he is charismatic, and he can pull people along. He's a populist wokey, right? And they can carry young people with them right to the point of the reality check. I get the affordability thing. I get the fact young people are angry. They can't pay for stuff. They can't get rentals and so on. Of course, I get why they gravitate to somebody who says, I'm going to sort all this out. You're going to get all this stuff for free. But we know that doesn't work. There's nowhere in the world you can point to where socialism of the kind that he is spewing actually can work. In the end, he'll just have to do what the Labour Party is now doing to people in Britain, which is they promise the earth, and now they're making everybody pay the earth for it.
So my fear is that New York is going to become London. Like, I'm really not.
London's not as bad as you guys all think it is.
I mean, every time I go, it seems worse. Now, not in terms of necessarily government control over everything, but you have a huge, I would say, Islamist or jihadist problem. It seems to me that every time I go, it's more visible and more obvious. Clearly, there's some sort of cultural problem on the street. There's also a free speech issue in your country, which I want to talk about. But explain to me, if London's not as bad as we think it is, what is the disconnect?
London, I mean, I always tell my American friends to put it in context on the Islamist issue. It is true. There are, I think, 80-something Sharia courts have been reported to exist in the UK.
So you have courts that exist.
Yeah, but they're not legally binding outside of their own communities, right?
Sure, but
it's not something people feel comfortable about because you obviously don't want rival laws being established in your own country where people in that community do not obey your own laws but abide by their own. Obviously, that's untenable. We have a lot of Muslims in Britain, most of whom assimilated extremely well and exist perfectly well with everybody else and exist very peacefully. But inevitably, the more people you have from any community, the more issues you're going to have, which are not so good. And you've seen that in certain parts of Britain now. I think there's a general sense of communities where you feel like there's a clash ideologically between these communities and, I guess you would say, old-fashioned British communities. And I think that's where the flashpoint has come. A lot of that is down to successive governments, conservative and left, I think, having appalling issues in how they regulated immigration. And it goes back to Tony Blair in the early 2000s. Actually, the original problem, he opened the floodgates to Eastern Europe, actually. But then the floodgates opened everywhere. Then you've got illegal migrants coming over on the southern border on these small boats from France. That's become a huge problem. None of them can tackle. But legal migration, I think net migration in 2024 was nearly 1 million people. Now, to put it in context, you're a country of 340 million people. We're a country of just under 70 million people. Right? We're a fifth of the size of the United States. And yet we are having a net migration in 1 year of 1 million people. That's a huge burden to put on the infrastructure of our country.
So what do you think the resolution of that is? The reason I'm not bullish on the UK in general is that I see no resolution other than what will ultimately be a violent resolution.
Well, I think people talk about civil war or something. I don't think it's going to come to that. But I do think you need to have a much tougher government run immigration system than we have currently, both legal and illegal. The big problem with the legal migration, we were letting people in who were highly skilled and might contribute well to society, but we allowed them to bring almost unlimited dependents with them. So they were bringing huge numbers of their family with them. And this puts incredible pressure on things like the National Health Service. Well, the National Health Service, the NHS, which was the pride of the world, actually. You know, if you go and break a leg in London next time you're over, God forbid, I don't want you to, and I'm not going to be breaking it for you. But if you broke your leg in London, you would get free healthcare in a very good hospital immediately.
We've got some decent hospitals here. We'll take care of it.
Yeah, but I remember...
If you twist your ankle on the way out...
Oh, hang on. I remember breaking some ribs, falling off a Segway, of all things. Can you believe how embarrassing that was? Of a Segway in Santa Monica. And all I remember is I was fitting in and out. I collapsed my lung, broke 5 ribs. It was horrendous. I was fitting in and out of consciousness. And all I remember is a guy in a suit with a form saying, can you pay for this, right? You don't get that in England, right? If that same thing happens in England, we treat you, Dave Rubin, we repair you, and that's it. So,
well, they would have treated you either way. They might have just thrown you to a different hospital.
Right.
They looked at you. They were like, this guy looks.
But they wanted my money.
Got some cash.
And that's a cultural difference. So we're used to the National Health Service. At its best, it's amazing. But it was designed in the 50s for a population of 50 million people. We now have a population of nearly 70 million. So that's happened in 75 years. So the infrastructure of the NHS is creaking at the seams. If you start adding 1 million more people a year coming in, wherever they're coming from, you're going to start having huge pressure on the NHS, on the education system, on other public services. And it feels like Britain to me. The real problem, it feels like it's creaking at the seams.
Right. So just one more on this then. So really, like, in the most granular way, what do you do? It seems to me that no one in Europe, because the same problems that you just laid out there, Germany's having their version of it, France is having.
Yeah.
What do you do? I mean, actually, if you were prime minister, what would you do?
Well, it's difficult. I don't pretend for a moment it's easy, but you certainly, on the small boats issue coming in, which is, to me, is part of the problem, but it's not like the problem, because you're getting 50, 60,000 people coming in illegally on the southern border. You've had 10 million come in the Biden administration. So it's all relative.
They think it might be 20 million. I mean, the numbers are just impossible.
Right. So they clearly just completely deliberately lost control of the border, it seemed to me. We've not had that. We've had successive governments trying to control it. We've got to try and do a deal. I keep saying, what would Trump do? He'd say to Macron, right, here's the deal. If you don't stop these people getting on these boats, your end, which is the only way to really stop it. Once they get out there into the English Channel, really there's hardly any way to stop it. So you've got to stop it at the French end before they get on the boats. You just say, right, do what Trump would do, 1,000% tariffs until you sort this out. I suspect it would get sorted very quickly. Remember the backdrop of Brexit and how much ill feeling that caused with the rest of Europe, with the UK coming out of the European Union. So the French have no great allegiance to us now in terms of helping us. Why would they? Right? We're no longer part of the club.
Right.
We've left the club. So it's like, screw you. You've got a problem at your end. We don't care.
They're not big on helping in general.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a very French response. But I would do the Trump response, right? Just tariff the hell out of them until they stop it. In terms of legal migration, they're beginning to get there. But in terms of the assimilation of communities, I think that's the problem that is rising down. I don't think you can have a situation where you have communities operating, as I say, with their own Sharia law courts and so on. I just don't think that's going to work in a country like the UK. They've got to do something about this. Now, how you do that without inflaming a lot of tensions on both sides, I don't know. Because at the moment you've got people like Tommy Robinson, who over here is kind of sainted. Let me tell you, I do not view him as a saint. It's like he's got a message that in certain parts of his message he's right. In other parts, he's woefully exaggerating the situation for his own gain. And he's probably the worst possible messenger. However, when he talks about the grooming gangs in the north of England, which were horrendous and were covered up and were all British Pakistani men doing this to young white girls, he's right. So there are lots of parts of what he says which I think he's right about. But the idea that he's the standard bearer for kind of a solution to this which doesn't result in a violent solution, I think is for the birds. Because his whole history says otherwise.
Yeah, so what is it about him that you don't like? I know you guys have a bit of a history, and I think maybe you banned him from the show or something like that. Because I see him as one of the few people standing up for your country.
He wants you to see him like
that.
He's incredibly disingenuous. Like if you talk to Tommy Robinson, I've asked him on my show now, every week, I call him Bottle Job on X, right? I was like, come on, Bottle Job. You familiar with the phrase Bottle Job? No. It's an English phrase that means he's got no bottle. He's lost his bottle. He's got no guts, right? And there's a reason he won't come on my show, but it does everybody else's shows. Other people haven't scrutinized, as I have, actually his track record on stuff and what the reality is. Take the story he loves to tell on American Airways about the young Syrian boy who he lost a court case to. He made a documentary about this boy and about how violent he was and so on and so on. It was full of lies. The Syrian boy sued him. He won, 6-figure payout. He knows this, Tommy Robinson. His real name, by the way, is Stephen Yaxley. He's not even called Tommy Robinson. A lot of it's a facade. He sued him, And the film was a deliberate defamation because it was a breach of a court order. That's why he went to prison. He wasn't sent to prison because of a free speech argument. He was sent to prison for contempt of court because he repeated lies he'd said about this young Syrian kid, which were proven to be untrue in a court case, which is why the kid won the court case. So Tommy Robinson wants to present himself as a great freedom of speech king. And a lot of Americans lap this up because they don't actually look into the facts of it. I just urge everybody, go and study the story. Go and study the court case.
Right.
Study the resolution. Study the contempt of court law in the UK. He knew what he was doing. So, look,
I can't speak to that, but what I can speak to is from an American perspective, when I see someone out there who's leading these marches with your flag, who's proud of your country, who wants to address all the things that you just laid out there as problems, I see that as someone that's a good guy. I can't speak to all 10 of the things that he's done or not done.
I would say this. I think there are certain things he's right about and there are certain things he's wrong about. One thing he's not is a good guy. Right, he's a convicted football thug. He's a convicted fraudster. It's not even his real name. He deliberately defamed this kid and then went to jail because he breached a contempt of court. So I don't think he's a good guy. However, on things like the grooming gang scandal, he was loudly shouting about this long before many in the mainstream media were doing so. And he was shut up and there were attempts to silence him and censor him. And he was absolutely right about that. So, he's a complex character, Robinson. I would love to have him on my show. I'm sure he watches this show.
Yeah,
I think he
likes
you.
He likes me.
Right. So, Tommy, if you're watching, Stephen.
Well, that's good to hear.
Tommy, come on. You and me, one-on-one. There's a reason you don't want to do it because you know that I will ask tricky questions about a lot of the stuff you claim is your version of events, but we both know isn't. So, look, I don't pretend for a moment he doesn't resonate with a lot of British people, nor do I pretend for a moment there aren't certain elements that follow him who are violent right-wing thugs who just want to punch up and actually want racial lack of cohesion. But I do think that he himself is becoming a bigger and bigger figure in Britain because of the failure of successive governments to control immigration. So it's not like he's wrong about everything. He's not.
Right. I don't want to spend too much time on him, but I think actually if there were other people in your country that seemingly were standing up for your country properly and dealing with these issues, then that probably his face wouldn't be out there as much.
I think that's entirely right. And I think it's incumbent on the elected officials. I say to Tommy Robinson, go and run for office. If because it's interesting, even people like Nigel Farage, have all the traction with the Reform Party. He has no truck with Robinson. He won't take his, they're very split.
Yeah.
So it's not like there's a sort of on the right an agreed position about this stuff. There's not. A lot of people view Robinson like I do, including Farage. But I think that, it's disingenuous and intellectually dishonest to say that there are not certain things he's been absolutely right about. The grooming gang scandal was horrendous, one of the worst scandals in Britain in modern times, and he was one of the loudest people calling it out.
Do you feel when you interview somebody so if you have some of the people on the other side of this, on the sort of more Islamist or leftist side, that you treat them in interviews with the same scrutiny that you would treat someone like Tommy Robinson?
Yeah. I try and be intellectually honest.
Like when you have like a Blazarian or Candace or some of these people.
I go after him. I did Blazarian. I went after him, I think, in a way that it was interesting. I watched the Tucker interview with Nick Fuentes. I won't platform Fuentes, and he wouldn't come on. But I accept Tucker's argument.
Well, you know what just happened. Now he's going to say he wants to go on because you just said that.
Okay.
So now they're going to clip this and that's what he's going to say now.
Then okay. If you want to come on, just bear in mind, I will go after you about all the hateful statements you've made, including your love of Adolf Hitler. So it'll be a slightly different tone to the interview. My only critique of what Tucker did was I just think he gave him a bit of a free run and didn't pin him to the floor in a way that, ironically, Tucker did to me when we interviewed each other in the desert in Saudi Arabia.
We played that clip.
Right,
I mean, it got bizarrely hostile.
Well, he was kind of tough. I didn't mind. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I liked Tucker. But he was tougher on me and Ted Cruz than he was on Nick Fuentes and Vladimir Putin. There's a disconnect there, which I think is a valid criticism.
Right, which then Megyn Kelly asked him about at the live show. And he basically was like, well, go ahead and do your own interview, which is a little strange in light of how he treated you, but really Ted Cruz particularly.
Look, in a way, I don't tend to critique other interviews.
Yeah.
For the purpose...
No, I don't. You can see, it's not something I revel in.
Because in a way, like, you can sit, this is your show, your lair, you can conduct this interview any way you want to do it, right? Yeah. I don't think it's really incumbent on me to tell other people how to do their interviews. Tucker has a massive audience. It's just, I did notice he was a bit tougher on me than Fuentes.
So what do you make broadly of what seems to be going on with Tucker and in that space, putting aside how someone interviews somebody, just whatever is going on in that area right now?
Well, it's interesting. You've got Tucker, you've got Candace Owens, you've got these, and they're sort of behemoths in the YouTube cyberspace world. They've just basically gone huge. They get a lot of people.
The algorithms also seem to really like them, which is extremely interesting.
They do, and they're obviously making a ton of money doing it. And, I've taken on Candice a few times, not least her ridiculous campaign against Brigitte Macron, who she keeps saying is a man. I think the court case will establish she's a woman, and Candice will have to end up paying loads of money. But even then, she will, I can guarantee you, twist it into some kind of Pyrrhic victory for herself, albeit she'll owe me $300,000, which is the current size of our bet about whether Brigitte
Macron... Oh, is that right?
There's an male or female.
Bet? Okay.
$300,000 to charity, dollars. I say that Brigitte Macron is a woman who's had 3 children. It's quite easy to prove she's a woman.
Man, our public discourse really has...
it's just, but I interview Candice a lot. I find it incredibly... She's very bright. She's very compelling. She's a great debater. Very like Tucker. Do I agree with everything they say? No. Do I think they promote what I consider conspiracy theory sometimes? Yes. The problem with just condemning all that out of hand is that, as the pandemic taught me and others, one person's conspiracy theory can often turn out to be actually a bit closer to the truth than the people saying conspiracy theory imagined. And we saw that a lot in the pandemic. I fell foul of it myself a few times.
But you've apologized.
I've apologized,
several times I've seen it.
Yeah, I don't have that stuff. Because again, you've got to be...
So because I've got the tweets here.
Of course, but the tweets are still there.
Yeah.
So I haven't tried to delete them or hide it. I've owned my shame. And my shame was this about the pandemic. It's not that I don't think that the vaccines worked. I think they did. I think they saved a lot of lives. But it is true that the scientific advice that was being put out...
I'm not with you on that, but...
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough. But the point where I absolutely conceded I was 100% wrong, and I blame the scientists, but I learned a lesson. Next time I won't be so compliant with what the scientists are saying. But there was a period quite early on with the pandemic when the science advice promoted by governments around the world was if you had the vaccine, you couldn't transmit the virus. Therefore, the presumption for the public was, well, you're going to help save lives, because if you have it, you not only protect yourself in a way, but you're also not going to be infecting other people if you get the virus. So, the grandmother at home is not going to get it from you.
Yeah, I just never believed it.
Right, so that turned out to be totally untrue. But in the period before it was declared untrue, and in fact it made little difference to transmission whether you had the jab or not, I became incredibly censorious. Ridiculously. I look back and I just cringe at what I was saying, the way I was saying it. I was too believing in what the experts were telling me. That will never happen again. I'll be far more questioning next time, far more journalistic, I think. So I'm unashamed. I said, look, it's fine. I got it wrong. And I leave those tweets up, and there are certain people who just literally post them every week for clicks. And it's like, why are you bothering? I've already said, I know I was wrong. It shouldn't have been done like that.
Do you think some of the reason that you missed it on COVID and there's, BLM stuff that you've said that's kind of sort of, I would say, insane or really misguided. Do you think some of that is just because you came from the mainstream world? So the ecosystem you were in just sort of circled around
I think it's
so many wrong things.
Yeah, I think honestly, it's a kind of fine line, isn't it? Because I think that I try and sit in the center. I think that whenever I've strayed too far left or right, I've normally regretted it, actually. I think my position ideologically, I don't like to be partisan. I don't like to be positioned into a left or right political box about anything. I try and look at things with intellectual honesty as best I can. But have I always been right? No. Have I made big mistakes? Absolutely. It was interesting. I watched the Tucker thing with Megyn, and he talked again about how he supported the Iraq War. I vehemently oppose the Iraq War. We've all got our wins and losses in the causes we take. I'm sure you would concede you have had too, right? Yeah. So none of us is right all the time about these things. What I learned from the pandemic was it's very dangerous to be overly censorious based on information in a fast-moving health crisis, or any story, BLM being another one. Right? Those who lassoed themselves to Black Lives Matter, the organization. Well, look, when George Floyd got murdered in the way he did, it was despicable and horrendous. For us to watch it all happening over the 8-minute video, whatever it was an appalling thing. I make no bones about thinking that that was one of the worst things I've watched. And actually, yes, it should have been a moment of reflection for everybody about what we do to try and stop this happening. However, the Black Lives Matter movement that developed and the activists behind it, I do think that, for example, although I was very censorious again about the January 6th riots, make no apology for that. I thought it was horrific what happened that day. However, where I have sympathy with those on that side is they got treated far more severely than any of the protesters beating up police officers or smashing up shopping parades and so on. So there was a real double standard between the way that the left-wing protesters on the Black Lives Matter marches were treated to the January 6th rioters. For example, I can expose that hypocrisy quite willingly, regardless of which side I see it. So, I try and look at all things as fairly as I think I can. And I try and, more importantly, I think, I get people on from all sides of the debates. So that even if I'm myself not entirely certain, I do this with you.
Yeah.
I'll get you on with somebody like Harry Sisson or wherever it may be, and I'll let you guys go at it. And actually, I sit there and my brain whirs, and I'm like, well, which one of these is actually being more persuasive to me? That's why I think my show resonates.
I think in that case, it's fairly easy.
I think you probably do resonate better than Mr. Sisson.
Come on. Although he kills it in the comments. Well, he kills it in the comment section in that everyone hates him. And if you just lay out calm things. Well, so let me ask you about that, because I will be completely, totally honest with you. About 8 months ago, I basically said to myself, I don't want to do Piers' show anymore, because the way the debates go, all of the people, the screaming, the lunatics, the jank, and these awful people, where you have a certain set of people largely on the right who come on that are thoughtful and can explain their ideas, and Wajat and all these nutbags. And I really swore it off. And then I did do it again. I did it the day after Charlie died, and I had to demolish jank the way I did with receipts. But I view it now as it's adding flame. It's just adding fuel to the fire, that nothing good is coming out of it. And in a weird way, I don't mean that as a knock to you. I mean it maybe as a knock to what the internet has become. What do you make of it?
Well, I think
so. For example, if you ask me right now, Dave, you want to come on my show for a one-on-one interview the other way, or even for maybe a one-person debate, which I did it with you in person in London, which with that socialist, and I enjoyed that. But the other thing I think has now become something that is not helping. That's just my opinion.
No, I think it's perfectly fair criticism, and I've seen criticism of my show where people say you're the Jerry Springer of political debate because you just want people fighting all the time. It's not true, actually. I don't like it when it becomes too much of a circus. I don't like it when people shout over each other, because the viewer can't really understand what's happening. I do like fiery, passionate debate between people who are ideologically completely miles apart.
that I love,
and I do like one-on-ones, and I do like just me doing an interview with one person. So I like all different types. This week alone, I've had Cristiano Ronaldo week, right? Completely different vibe altogether. I went to Saudi Arabia and sat with 2 hours with Cristiano Ronaldo, the greatest football player of all time, in my opinion. Very different, obviously, to a 4-person debate with Cenk Uygur or you or wherever it may be. Sometimes I think if the story, look, the Israel war with Hamas in Gaza has been an extremely toxic and divisive thing. So I think you're getting a lot of people with big followings who only on their own world, to their own sort of echo chambers, pump out their views, and they rarely get challenged. I like to think that what my show does, it brings together people on both sides of these debates, whether it's Russia and Ukraine, whether it's Israel and Hamas, whether it's Trump, whether it's Brexit, whatever it may be. Brings people together who have strong opinions and big followings, so they're getting a lot of traction anyway for their views, and they actually have to meet each other and go at each other.
Yeah.
And when it gets,
do you think they're meeting each other?
Well, sometimes I do love it. I have to say, I do love it. One of my favorite things is when I can get a point of agreement. Right? Because I do think that democracy demands that we try and do that. I do think that a lot of people, they pump themselves up and they start shouting at each other. They don't want to hear another view. I accept that. But sometimes I do get to a place where people can agree on various points. And it reminded me, I remember talking to Bill Clinton when he had about a year or so crossover with Vladimir Putin, when they became leaders around the same time. And he said, the thing about dealing with Putin was, if you just went out and hammered him in public. You got nowhere with him. He said, and we would have these big meetings, him with all his team, me with all my team, and we'd go at each other really hard, but we weren't really getting anywhere. It was all posturing theatre. And eventually we throw everybody out, and it'd just be me and him. So it's an interesting parallel.
Yeah.
And so we go hard at each other. He's a hard guy. He said, well, then we'd reach points of agreement. And I said, did he keep his word? He went every time. Which I just thought was quite interesting. That clip's gone viral quite a few times, actually. Peter might be a very different character now, but certainly it is what I've heard from other people about him. Is he's extremely tough. He's very ruthless. He knows what he wants for Russia and so on. But you can get to a point of agreement, and when he shakes his hand with you, that's a deal, right? And in a way, I see that as a kind of microcosm of what I want to do with the show. I want to bring people together. Look, I want to do big one-on-one interviews. I want to do interviews with 2 people, 1 either side. They're great as well. I do a lot of those. But when you have the 4 people, 2 on either side about a big issue, I make no apologies for it getting passionate and fiery. I just hope that rather than it descending, as it sometimes does, into total chaos, that actually I can calm people enough where I can try and bring them to a point where we can at least agree on various points. Right. And then I think it serves a very valuable purpose.
Do you think there's a fundamental reason, though, that the people that tend to be left-leaning in these debates are the ones screaming, yelling, saying all the awful things? Like, it's very... Can you think of one instance where someone that you brought on the right in one of these debates was doing any of that?
Vinny O'Charlotte can get pretty low.
I've been on with Vinny. No, he gets... But it's usually... he yells a little bit, but it's like... But he's doing it kind of... He's a comic also.
He does, but he can be
but
very
that's
fiery.
Fundamentally different than a lot of the crazy shit that's coming out of the people on the left.
For instance, when it's you and Cenk, for example, you remaining icily calm drives him completely nuts. Yeah. But as a viewer, I really like the dynamic of you two. You might find it a little odd and unsettling to do it, but as a viewer, they think you've got cool hand Rubin, and you've got mad Cenk going bonkers. I love Cenk. I get on very well with him personally, right?
But him?
I do like him, actually. No, actually, I go and have coffee with him in LA sometimes. He's charming company, right? But he just gets very wound up to the point his blood vessels start exploding. You don't. You tend to stay very calm, and I think the dynamic is
I think when you tell the truth, it's easy to become calm. When you're a lying propagandist,
but he's screaming. Obviously, he says exactly the same about you guys on the right. So that's what I mean about. So if you're a viewer in the middle and you're not actually, self-declared partisan, I hope you look at you both and actually sometimes one will win, sometimes the other wins, sometimes you both get a win. It's like, it's an interesting little battle to watch if you're not on the
So in that moment, side. when I pulled the receipts out and I read his titles back, so what's going on in your mind when you see one of those moments?
Piers, shut up and let Dave do his thing.
All right, so let's get into one that I have hit you on repeatedly on Twitter. We've had our little things back and forth, and again, it's always respectful. But I want to show you one. It's a little compilation. It's about 60 seconds or so. Some of the Israel stuff.
Basically, waging war on a very small area of land, densely populated by 50% children, and in the process, you're killing thousands and thousands of children, and will continue to do so. And I have resisted going as far as you have done in your criticism of the Israeli government. I resist no more. I think we've reached common ground about what we view is happening and has been happening through this period of this blockade, which frankly is just starvation of the people there, including so many innocent young women and children. And I think that the incessant bombing and killing, and we don't know how many civilians have been killed, but it is on a daily basis. It looks like hundreds of people every day, with no apparent attempt, it seems to me, to have any real plan for how this ends or what happens when it ends. How many children have you killed?
Piers, Israel is not killing children.
Israel is killing children every single day.
Piers, this is a blood label you're putting on Israel. You know it's not true.
No, it's not actually. And what you're trying to do is be very weaselly with your words.
No, I'm not.
They then moved into a nearly 3-month blockade, which to me is a criminal starvation of a populace, which should never have been allowed to happen. The bombardment has been utterly relentless all over Gaza. They've obliterated 70% of Gaza. I think is completely disproportionate to what happened to Israel on October the 7th. These hardliners on the Israeli government cabinet, the way they've been talking now quite brazenly and openly about ethnic cleansing.
Okay, so it's weird to even have to show that, and we sit in a room together.
Can I make one point about it?
Yeah.
No, it's actually, I don't mind that at all. I stand by everything I said. Yeah. But it's interesting, you've only shown my rhetoric this year from the 3-month blockade onward.
No. So
I would say it would be fairer if you'd also shown my passionate defense of Israel.
Well, you addressed it.
To defend itself, which I maintained for a long time, by the way, and used to get absolutely hammered by the pro-Palestinian side in a way that I've since this year had more hammering from the pro-Israeli side. So,
well, you addressed it there. That's why we put that clip in.
And I think that's just
because there has been a shift. That's what I wanted.
No question.
Right. So I think that is so. First off, you acknowledge that there's been no starvation, correct?
No,
you don't acknowledge.
I don't acknowledge that.
Well, there was starvation of the Israeli hostages, but you
yes.
So where are the videos and images of the starving Gazans?
Well, I've seen a lot, but you would dismiss them all as fakes.
No, I wouldn't. I mean, if you can show me one, I'll tweet it out.
Okay, here's my problem with this. Yeah. So the problem is my number one problem with this. Yeah. You can say there's no starvation. I can say there's starvation. The UN says there was starvation, but you guys don't believe a word the UN says. The other official bodies say there was starvation. You don't want to hear a word they say. Israel denies everything. And in the end, the biggest problem is that Israel will not allow, to this day, international journalists into Gaza to do their jobs. And I keep asking, why is that? Because you and I can...
Well, because they're virtually all activists, not journalists.
No, I don't mean Palestinian journalists. Yeah. I mean international journalists.
No.
I mean the international.
So
let in Reuters, let in AP, let in the BBC, let in Sky, let in
it's also
NBC,
a war zone.
Let in
it's
ABC.
A war zone.
Yeah, but they operate in war zones all over the world.
But so when this all ended a few weeks ago, when Trump does this thing, where are all the thousands of starving people? I mean, we're seeing videos of restaurants that are
let the journalists in to do their job.
But I mean, right now, where are they? These people have phones.
How do you know?
Live stream. What do you mean?
Do you see where they are?
Of course, there are plenty of videos.
Can't.
What do you mean? There are plenty of videos.
The media are not allowed to do their jobs, Dave.
No.
And I have a big problem as a former editor of a national newspaper.
But the Gazans have phones, and they're showing videos of...
You can say that no Gazan has starved at all. That's entirely your prerogative.
Yeah.
The reports by almost every official body say the opposite, but you don't believe them. My view is you're entitled to not believe anyone, right? It's fine. I had that thing with Meghan Markle. Didn't believe her either. It cost me my job. However, the best way to get to the truth is let journalists who are used to covering in war zones, let them go in and do their job. Particularly now we have the ceasefire. So let them go in. There is a reason the Israeli government is not letting the media in. And I fear I know what it is. They are terrified about what the world will uncover.
I just think that's just...
Well, let him in.
I just think...
It's one way to find out.
But there are quite literally, I think, almost 2 million Gazans there. They have phones. They're releasing videos now. They're at restaurants. They're out and about. Why did none of the Hamas fighters, when they're releasing the people, look hungry? A lot of them look fat. They have fresh clothes and fresh haircuts.
I've seen lots of images of Palestinians looking hungry.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't dispute that 20,000 plus children have died, right?
So whose fault is that? Because this seems to be the one that most people are annoyed at you about, because you keep saying proportionate. That's the word that has bothered me with this. So what if someone killed your wife and your daughter and kidnapped your son and raped and pillaged your whole community and all that stuff? What would be your proportionate response?
Well, you've got to get it into the context of why I criticise what happened. I do believe the 3-month blockade earlier this year was a criminal blockade. I believe it was deliberate starvation of a people, deliberately denying them food and aid.
Has any other country in the history of the world been told to feed the people that are killing it? If you look at the Geneva
Convention, but then no other country in the world has the control that Israel has over Gaza, right? Well, which again is a whole separate issue.
Egypt could open the door.
Of course it could, and it should. And it should.
Nobody's annoyed at Egypt.
I don't dispute that for a moment.
Yeah.
And look, I've always supported Israel and its right to exist. And when this happened, October the 7th, one of the worst things I've ever seen, and I steadfastly supported Israel's right to defend itself, and I still do. However, I kept asking from early on, what would be a proportionate response?
But who has ever been asked to have a proportionate response?
Well, let me ask you.
So they should have murdered 1,000 people and raped women?
Let me throw it back at you. Yeah. In the history of the Israel-Palestine conflict, 75 years or so, there has never been a response from either side to an atrocity by the other. Both sides claim the other side's committed atrocities, right? There's never been a response, anything on this scale. So we had, on October the 7th, 1,200 people were killed. We had nearly 7,000 more wounded. We had 255, 6 people who were kidnapped, including a baby, including Holocaust survivors. Absolutely horrific. But the reason I asked about proportionality, show me another moment in the 75-year conflict where the response has been to kill 60 times as many people, and where you have well, hang on, let me finish. Where you have a government with people like Smodrich and Ben-Gvir who begin publicly, openly talking about ethnically cleansing all the Palestinians from Gaza, about annexing the West Bank, about taking complete control of all of it, to the point that Donald Trump had to step in and say that is not happening, and credit to him for doing that.
Sure,
so
but random ministers
well, they're not random ministers.
about...
They're two of the most senior people in the government.
No, but them talking about things is different. I mean,
I hear that a lot.
But is there literally, can you name one Palestinian leader, either Fatah or Hamas, that isn't for a complete genocide? Is there one?
There isn't in for a complete genocide.
Yeah, of the Israeli people. Is there one? Can you name one Palestinian leader that isn't for a complete genocide of every Jew?
We under no illusion about what I think about Hamas, for example. I think Hamas are a despicable terror group.
But so what would its proportional response
so my
be?
point, well, my point is this. You have a unique population in Gaza where half of them are under 18. There is a unique proportion of kids in this part of the world, right? So at what point do you try and find a different way to resolve this? It turned out that Donald Trump found a different way to do it, right? Donald Trump did not agree with Israel continuing to just level Gaza to the floor. He did not agree with Ben-Gvir and Smodrich saying kick all the Palestinians out. Actually, he wants to rebuild Gaza now and make it a prosperous place for Gazans to live, right? But he also wants a two-state solution, which I don't think Netanyahu wants in a million years, right?
Well, I don't know that Trump wants a two-state solution.
Well, I think
I think
ultimately, if he could achieve it where you can protect the security of Israelis, he would.
Yeah.
Because it's the only way this ever gets resolved.
Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with that.
You don't?
The Palestinians already have a state. It's called Jordan. They have a majority Palestinian population. They're ruled over in a actual apartheid by the Hashemite king. But nobody wants to talk about that.
This is how people in Northern Ireland used to talk, right? Yeah. On both sides, you'd have implacable positions. We can never do peace with these people. They're terrorists. They'd all the loyalists and the IRA call themselves terrorists for 7 decades, right? And eventually, you had new clear thinking by Bill Clinton, by Tony Blair, by Senator Mitchell, and we managed to get to peace that nobody thought was achievable amongst warring people who lived amongst each other.
But how many?
Very similar to the Gaza-Israel border.
But how many times should the Israelis offer peace? I mean, I'm sure you're well aware that Bill Clinton says his biggest failing was getting Arafat to not accept.
And I think
they've been offered 10 times.
Arafat should have taken that deal. Yeah. I'm completely with Bill Clinton.
So, but again, what is a proportionate response?
I don't know.
So what would you demand if your wife was
if I'm
murdered?
An Israeli, here's my question. If I'm an Israeli, or if I'm a Jew living out of Israel around the world, right? And, I was in New York recently. More Jews live in New York than live any Jewish community outside of Tel Aviv, I've read.
Not much longer.
Huh?
Not much longer.
We'll see.
They're going to move here.
The case. Yeah. But I look at it, I think, do they feel safer by what's happened, or do they feel less safe? I would argue that the conduct and the way that the Israeli government has waged this war, particularly this year, has actually inflamed hatred of the Israeli government, but also, by association, Israel, Israelis, and Jewish people. I don't think it's made them more secure. I think it's made them less secure. So in all wars, Dave, at some point, you have to have a political solution. The only solution that seemed to be being offered by Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, Smodrich, and the others was to raise Gaza to the floor and to expel all Palestinians. So, thankfully, Donald Trump sees it a different way. And I thank God that he does, because this had to end.
I think you're having a disconnect between what Bibi and Trump think. I think they're completely aligned on this.
Netanyahu would annex West Bank tomorrow.
He's been in power for 20-something years. He could have done it at any point. Notice he hasn't. I mean,
come on.
But he hasn't.
But it's like the argument, we haven't dropped an atomic bomb on Gaza, therefore, obviously,
if they wanted
fair in love and war, right?
No, but there's a couple things here. I mean, first off, I don't think any country in the world has ever been asked to feed the people that are holding its hostage, right? Like, have you ever called for any other country to do that, or anyone?
Well, okay,
has anyone ever called for that?
Well, British prisoners of war in World War II were fed.
Yeah. But
what's the difference?
What?
Prisoners of war in World War II were fed, so what's the difference?
Because they were holding hostages. They're holding their people. I mean, to me, it seems that you as a British citizen,
people being held hostage in Nazi prisons.
But you as a British citizen, if French terrorists came in and killed what the equivalent would be, it would be many more than 1,200. But let's say they killed 10,000 British people and they took your wife and killed your daughter. Would you be calling for a proportionate response?
No, but then
would you say, whatever the fuck you have to do to get my wife back?
You should never ask what somebody who's just lost their family would do in that situation. Obviously, they're going to be speaking from a totally different.
Well, I'm asking you hypothetically, if they literally took your wife.
Yes, but I don't think it matters what I think is the grieving father or husband of people who've just been slaughtered. Governments should be above that. They have to take a decision which takes everything into account. And the question I come back to is, do you believe that Israel is now a safer or less safe place for Israelis and Jews than it was before?
Way safer.
Is it?
They're external. They're external enemies. I mean, that's empirically true. They're external enemies, from Iran to Hezbollah to the Houthis. They're basically destroyed.
You know, there've been reports that for every Hamas fighter that's been killed, terrorist I call them, for every Hamas terrorist has been killed, they reckon they've been replaced 5 times with people with the same ideology.
But that's like saying you can't defeat Nazis.
Well, I agree.
We dropped
I agree,
nukes,
and I've made
right?
I've made that point.
Japan.
I've made that point myself.
Yeah.
But I do not think, in answer to the proportionate question, I'm very glad the ceasefire came when it did. I'm very glad the hostages got released. They should have been released, obviously, immediately. Should never have been taken in the first place. I'm very glad Donald Trump made this happen. I fear if he hadn't got involved in the way he did, and clearly directed Netanyahu to do this, the hostages would have died. And so, again, I come back to this. What was the Israeli war aim? The government said they wanted to defeat Hamas completely, and they wanted to get the hostages out. The hostages are now out. Hamas is not defeated, but they are heavily dismantled. They've accepted they can no longer have power. The Arab countries around them have said they can't have power. The argument now is about whether they should give up their arms. I believe they should be compelled to do that. The unanswered question is, will they do that? And who's going to put the most pressure on them to do it? I hope that it's a concerted effort by the United States and by the Arab leaders around the area who say to Hamas, you've got to give up your arms. Then you have the opportunity in Gaza for a peaceful resolution. But I think Israel will look back. I've met a lot of Israelis.
So I've met a lot
of Israelis and Jews in the last few months who've felt that I've been absolutely right in what I've said. Not all. I've met others who said, the same questions you're asking me. I think they're perfectly valid questions. I'm very happy to debate them. But don't be under any illusion there aren't a lot of Israelis and Jews who agree with me that the Israeli government, which is a hard right government, Smodrich and Ben-Gvir are not just right-wing, they're absolute far-right headbangers.
But meaning what? Meaning what? They have
Meaning what? They want to ethnically cleanse the Palestinian people. Come on, Dave, they do.
They're in the government and they haven't taken an extra inch of the West Bank. They're not.
Well, actually, that's not true.
They haven't.
They've been expanding settlements left, right, and centre.
They haven't.
Yes, they have.
Piers,
they have.
Piers, have you been to the West Bank?
You don't think there've been any expansion of settlements on the West Bank?
They build apartments. In current places.
Has there been an aggressive expansion of settlements in the West Bank during this war?
An aggressive expansion of settlements
in the West Bank during this war?
No, 100% not.
Dave, there has been.
Would you say it's a square mile?
I don't know the territory. No. I just know there's been aggressive expansion of settlements.
But that's just, Piers, that's just.
But again, this is the problem. Okay, so here's the problem.
Have you been there?
So here's the problem.
Have you been there? I know people will love that on the internet.
You say none of this has happened. Yeah. You see everything to the prism of, there's nothing to see here, Gus.
No.
Israel has done no wrong.
No.
Have they done any wrong?
I don't know how to conduct a war exactly, but I know that if
it's not my question. Has the Israeli government done anything wrong in the way they prosecuted this war?
Not that I know of.
So that's the thing.
They're desperately trying to.
Okay, so you have a position.
In an existential war, you do what you have to do for your people. Okay. As I think is exactly what you would demand of your government.
Well, except that when my government went to war in Iraq, for example, I led the campaign against it, and I was proven right. I think it's more complicated. But
that's a war across the world where there were no British people being hidden under the ground.
This war didn't start on October the 7th. This is a conflict that's been going on for 7 decades. That's why I compare it, actually, to the war that was conducted between, say, the IRA and the British government.
Well, your government did 75 years ago offer the Palestinians a state for the first time because, as you know, the Palestinians never had a state. It was the British mandate.
I think the whole way it was organized at the start was deeply flawed. But I also read a very interesting piece by a guy called Jonathan Friedland. He's a British Jewish journalist who said he could have written 2 columns about what happened in 1947, 48, 49. He said, and one would have been very pro-Israel and one would have been very pro Palestinian, and he said that as a Jewish journalist. I think it was an interesting perspective, is that I've heard both sides argue passionately, but the crux of the combined debate is that it was very badly handled and should have been handled a lot better. You know, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced from their homes, but also hundreds of thousands of Israelis and Jewish people, as they were then, but obviously became part of Israel, were displaced from their homes in the region. So there was a lot of displacement of people's lives, uprooting of people's lives going on.
Sure.
And a lot of like enforced things by countries like Britain. You will do it this way. I think it could have been handled a lot better. And then a lot of the trouble could have been avoided.
All right, let's not end on this. But just no. I'm happy to do it. I wish we had more time, and this is why I prefer to do things face to face instead of with the screaming lunatics on the other side. I'm telling you that the expansions, like if you can't even tell me they've expanded a mile, it's because you.
But I don't know the exact geography.
But even a half mile.
I do. Well,
no, they haven't. Though.
But here's the problem.
They haven't.
My final point on this. Yeah. Here's the problem.
When they say a settlement, that means someone built an apartment.
You can sit there and deny all of these things, to which I simply say, fine. You might be right. The Israeli government's done nothing wrong. There's been no expansion of settlements. The war's been prosecuted as the most moral army in the world going about its business. To which I simply say, let the journalists in. Let's find out.
I mean, I don't think any army was feeding the people and dropping leaflets.
Do you agree the journalists should be let in?
Well, now you could let people in. It's a little less dangerous. Let them run around with.
You know what?
But these people have phones. These people have phones, right?
Yes, I've seen loads of footage that contradicts what you're saying. You wouldn't believe the footage.
No,
you just say it's fake.
We'll stop the camera and then we could, or we could do it right now. I mean, if you want to bust out your phone and show me all the starving people, what I see are hordes of young men with perfectly cut hair who are in shape with clothes that fit. I mean,
you don't honestly think that life for a young Palestinian kid in Gaza in the last 2 years has been anything but utter hell, do you?
Well, they unfortunately elected Hamas, who then...
and I don't disagree with you about a single thing you're about to say about Hamas. I agree with every word you're about to say. Let's park that to one side. I'm not denying for a moment that they are a despicable terror group.
I think somebody said war is hell.
It is, but ultimately you have to resolve it. And I'm very, very...
Yeah.
Oh, is that mine?
Oop, they're giving us the signal.
Sorry, no,
all right. We got
my alarm.
You got your alarm. All right.
That's my assistant beams in saying, get him out of there.
All right, 60
Interviewing is hell.
60 seconds left. Well, this is what it's all about, right? I mean, this really is what it's all about. It's what we both do for a living, and it doesn't change my opinion of you in any way or anything else.
And here's the thing: we should be able to have a spirited debate about these things, right? And I don't for a moment claim that ultimately history will prove I was completely right about everything. This is just my honestly held view, though. I don't come at it from a partisan perspective. I think if people look at my record over the entire war, for example, I've been very pro-Israel for a long time. I became increasingly critical of Israel. I've been steadfast in my hatred of all things Hamas. So people can judge me accordingly. But you and I can have a spirited, fiery debate, right, without any problem. And I know at the end of this, we'll shake hands.
Yeah, of course.
And if we see each other, you come to London, we'll go to my pub, we'll have a pint, whatever, have a nice dinner. It should never impact on that. I saw John Stewart said a really interesting thing last week, where he was talking about, you know, if you've got obviously he's a liberal. If you've got a big right-wing, headbanger of an uncle and it's Thanksgiving, do you snub him? As a lot on the left want to do. It's a big thing with the progressive left. You don't, or, the same way that if you're a conservative, should you snub some progressive left woke member of your family?
Most of us would prefer not to get shot at this point. Snubbing, we could probably...
No, I agree with... Listen, I totally agree.
Yeah.
And the woke left's war on free speech is the cornerstone of my book and culminates eventually in things like the murder of Charlie Kirk, which is where if you try and silence debate and free speech, that's what happens. And if you call everybody a fascist or a Nazi, that's what happens. So that's all covered in the book. But I think what's really important, the point he made was that even if you have an uncle and you're a liberal and your uncle's very right-wing, that he may have other qualities like John Stewart's uncle has, which are incredibly great qualities. Why would you pillory somebody or disown somebody because one part of their makeup doesn't suit you? That's where wokeism has taken us, I think. It's taken us to a thinking that if you don't sign up to my worldview, I'm going to shame you, cancel you, disown you, destroy you, maybe ultimately try and kill you. That, as I point out to them, is the personification of fascism. And yet they would say they hate fascists more than anybody else in the world. So there's an underpinning hypocrisy that runs right to the heart of wokeism, and it's that.
Fortunately, I'm not a leftist. Otherwise, I could have poisoned your coffee.
Yes.
It was good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you.
If you're tired of the mainstream media circus and want more honest conversations, go check out our media playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a wide variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.
Previously on the Rubin Report.
We're a breeding people.
That's a racist.
This is not what I voted for.
Get those videos out there. Abuela's head on the linoleum. Come on.
Oh, yeah. Using that term is so damaging.
The progressives are always trying to progress, and they're the ones that are retarding progression because they're progressing us towards retardation. All right, guys, how you doing? I'm Dave Rubin. This is the Rubin Report. It is December 2nd, 2025. We are live streaming on Rumble, on YouTube, on Locals. Post-game show, rubinreport.locals.com. Subscribe, all that stuff. Do want to quickly note something up top for those of you that are keen observers of the Rubin Report. If you thought that my demeanor was a little off for the last 6 or so minutes of yesterday's live show, you might be right. So the studio here is built in my house. We have a 3-bay garage. It's about a bay and a half is the studio here. And we're doing some electrostatic painting outside on the garage doors and on the walls out there. And they were painting. So this is actually on the other side of this is the garage door there. And they started painting while we were in studio. And about halfway through the show, there were insane fumes in here. And you know when you're in a situation like that, you start smelling something, but almost your brain doesn't kind of connect it to what's going on. And for the last 10 minutes of the show, I was seriously loopy. Connor was unconscious. It's a miracle the thing even went out to the internet. We've lost Phoenix, and we are looking for a new executive producer right now, and Joseph's laying in the corner over there. So there is a bit of a scent here today, and we're just going to plow through and see what happens. But if I lose my train of thought in the middle of this, you will fully know why. It is because we are, and it's nice that I pay 100% health insurance, by the way, for you good people. So if there are any problems, tingling in the fingers or whatever. Okay, let's do a show. A lot going on, usual craziness, little of everything. We're trying to defend the borders, and a bunch of Democrats don't want us to do that. So let's start right there. The big story of the last couple of days is that we are blowing up Venezuelan drug trafficking ships that are coming from Venezuela, bringing drugs, trying to get into America. We've decided to blow up these ships. Now, this is an easy, obvious thing. It is a type of, I think you could say, low-grade warfare. It's not like shooting a rocket from Venezuela into Florida, right? But it is a type of warfare if you try to poison a population of another country. And we've just had enough of it. And we've shown you some videos of this over the last couple of weeks that we're just blowing up these ships, right? And now there's a whole fracas about this. Is the president allowed to do it? And what do I always say? The Democrats are always on the side of the wrong people. And Trump is a master at exposing that, right? He takes an issue that's an 80-20 kind of obvious gut issue. He does the right thing. He gets them to go crazy and defend all the bad people, and it makes the Democrats look even stupider. So let's back up and jump to Jesse Waters for a moment. Last night, Trump has officially ordered U.S. warships to now surround Venezuela. That is an escalation over just blowing up these ships that are en route to our shores.
Fox News alert, it is Judgment Day. Sources say Maduro's been praying to Jesus. That's the narco-terrorist, socialist dictator who took over for Hugo Chavez in Venezuela and keeps flooding American streets with migrants, gangs, and cocaine. 11 U.S. warships, including our largest carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, are now in the Caribbean. Venezuela is surrounded. The strike group is waiting on orders from the commander-in-chief, as the president's holding high-level meetings at the White House, calculating our next move against the narco state. The choice is Maduro's. Trump's giving him an ultimatum: abdicate power or else. After Trump's phone call with the dictator, that's the best offer.
Okay, so things are a-moving. Now, let me take what I think is a clear America First position on this. I don't want adventurous wars. I don't like regime change or any of those things. We did those things for years, largely did not work out well. However, what is America first is defending our borders. Not only has Donald Trump closed the border and stopped illegal immigration, but a secondary thing that you might want to do if you're defending your borders is make sure that whoever can leak through the border one way or another isn't bringing drugs that will literally kill your citizens. And you need only go to San Francisco or Portland or Seattle or New York, et cetera, virtually all blue cities, as you know, because they're sanctuary cities. They have lower laws as it relates to crime and all the rest of it. It is a type of warfare. So Trump he's threatening. He's saying, hey, we're here. It's not just that we're going to blow up the boats. We might do something a little worse than that. It is called leverage and negotiation. It is called peace through strength. Here's Donald Trump on the Twitter machine. To all airlines, pilots, drug dealers, and human traffickers, please consider the airspace above and surrounding Venezuela to be closed in its entirety. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. So obviously this thing is escalating. I think that you can have an honest debate about what we should do. I personally don't have a problem with Donald Trump doing this. Again, I'm always interested in, what am I always interested in? I'm always interested in narrative and signal. And what is the signal Donald Trump is sending to the world? Again, we haven't bombed Venezuela or anything else. We've blown up a couple boats with bad guys with fentanyl and cocaine and other drugs on those ships. The signal he is sending is no more of this stuff. So the ships and the aircraft carriers, which we'll show you right now. Why don't we show a little video of this, about 20 seconds? I mean, you can see these are big time ships. I had a ship like that from G.I. Joe back in 1984. This is serious stuff. You got Duke, you got Lady J. Everybody's on these ships doing their thing. And the signal that we are sending is stop messing with us. Another signal we have sent over the last couple of months is that we changed the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War. And Pete Hegseth, who is heading up the Department of War right now, he put this up on X. This is great for your Christmas wish list. And obviously this is not a real book, although actually I would buy this book. It's a classic Franklin story. Franklin targets narco-terrorists, and there is Turtle Franklin with a bazooka blowing up the narco-terrorists. And those people on the boats, by the way, they have, as you can see, they have bundles of things, probably drugs. They're not the nicest people. They have weapons. And we shouldn't be that concerned, right? Like, just think about it this way. If a boat from any country in the world, pick your country, everyone watching this, pick a country in the world. A boat from that country is speeding towards America. Right? And it hasn't been given clearance to come to America. It doesn't have a port to show up, and it hasn't talked to us about coming. I'm pretty sure we're allowed to do what we got to do, right? They are bringing enough fentanyl into our country to probably kill an entire country, right? Like, it's crazy stuff. Fentanyl, these kids that are doing this, they don't realize what they're doing. They think they're buying, weed from some guy on the corner and it's laced with fentanyl. They take one puff and they're dead, right? This is a massive, massive epidemic. But the meta-narrative around all this is what I said up top. Trump is really good at kind of getting things right. People don't want drug dealers sending boats into America. Most people kind of just get that. You just get that. And then what does it cause the Democrats to do? Always defend the bad guy. So here is Chuck Schumer. I can't believe he's still around. I didn't know he has a job still, this Chuck guy. The Washington Post reported that Secretary Hegseth gave a directive to leave no survivors on the first alleged drug boat struck by U.S. forces. The Department of Defense has the tapes that show exactly what happened during these strikes, and Hegseth has an obligation to release those tapes. Now, look, I don't know what Hegseth's obligation is. I actually don't know what the legal obligation of the head of the Department of War is to release videotape or not. Whether Schumer is saying something truer there or not, that Hegseth said leave no survivors. Now, that would be interesting. It would be the signal again, right? What would be the signal you would be sending? If you're someone in Venezuela, I'm going to bring some fentanyl over to America. I'm going to hop in a boat. You want to come with me? Let's get going. And then, and then your friend comes up to you, and he said, his name is Jose, and he says, listen, it turns out that yesterday a bunch of our other friends went on a boat, and they left no survivors. So maybe I'm not going to go do that. That's what the signal is all about. But the Democrats just don't get it. They're much more interested in keeping the guy who didn't get fully killed in the first strike on the boat alive, rather than keeping American kids alive. It's not much more complex than that. Here's some more from Fox. The White House confirmed it defended conducting a second strike against alleged drug smugglers in the Caribbean in September, amid the Trump administration's crusade targeting the influx of drugs into the U.S. The White House's statement comes after the Washington Post reported Friday that Secretary of War Pete Hegseth verbally ordered that a September 2nd attack kill everyone on board the alleged drug boat, drawing scrutiny from lawmakers who are requesting additional oversight into the strikes. The Post reported that a second strike was conducted to take out the remaining survivors on the boat. Again, I think that, look, joking aside, or I'm being a little over the top here, there's probably some debate to be had about the rules of engagement, and we'll get to that in just a second. You know what I mean? The boat's coming, you blow up the boat, you eliminate the drugs, you kill a couple of people, and let's say there's some guys that are just swimming in the ocean right now. We can have a debate about what you do with those guys. The easy version, again, to the signal is you guys are narco-terrorists. You're drug traffickers like you don't deserve to live. You are doing something that is going to kill American citizens. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for it, but I think we can have some debate about, okay, if we've blown up the boat already and there's a couple people there, should we, there might be an intelligence reason we want to pick up those guys and find out some information. So there is something to discuss around that. But again, of course, the Democrats are just freaking out because we're killing people. We're killing people who are trying to kill our kids. Here's Caroline Levitt on that.
What law is it that allows no survivors? The strike conducted on September 2nd was conducted in self-defense to protect Americans in vital United States interests. The strike was conducted in international waters and in accordance with the law of armed conflict. And I would just add one more point to remind the American public why these lethal strikes are taking place. Because this administration has designated these narco-terrorists as foreign terrorist organizations. The president has a right to take them out if they are threatening the United States of America and if they are bringing illegal narcotics that are killing our citizens at a record rate, which is what they are doing. And under the previous administration, there was enough fentanyl trafficked into our country to kill every American man, woman, and child many times over.
Okay, so I think you can see why I view this as just like a very simple 80-20 issue. Nobody wants their kid to just die of a drug overdose just like that. People have seen the decay of our cities. The people, what do they call it? The heroin stoop or the fentanyl stoop? What's that thing when people are just like this? There's some term that they call it. And these people, there's a trend actually, I think it's coming out of Japan right now, where the kids go into the subway and they pretend that they're Americans and they just pretend that they're like this on drugs because that's how bad the problem is here. So again, we can have some debate, which is sort of what the question was about, in terms of the legality of a second strike or leaving no survivors. Personally, I don't have a problem with it. And again, imagine if a speedboat with a bunch of drugs or just freaking cassette players left America and was speeding towards, pick a country, Turkey, Caracas, it doesn't matter. They'd probably just blow it up and they wouldn't give a shit about who was on that boat. Like, countries have borders for a reason. Anyway, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who, as I keep saying, there's a lot of all-stars in this administration and in this cabinet, but he, I think, has become the voted in by the fans all-star here because he's just doing a great bang-up job. I think we played you this video about 10 days ago, but here he is once again explaining why we are doing this and that we have every right to defend ourselves and people should stop talking shit about us.
The United States is under attack from organized criminal narco-terrorists in our hemisphere, and the president is responding in the defense of our country. I do find it interesting that all these countries want us to send, and supply, for example, nuclear-capable Tomahawk missiles to defend Europe. But when the United States positions aircraft carriers in our hemisphere where we live, somehow that's a problem. So I would say that the United States is, and this president has made very clear, his job is to protect the United States from threats against the United States, and that is what he's doing in this operation.
All right, so you can see he is just clear. He is just ready for this job. He was supposed to be Secretary of State. Who knows where his future will go, but he's just communicating what it's not just American values. He's communicating what America stands for in the world right now. And we are a serious country again. We were an unserious country for 4 years, led by a man with dementia and an auto pen, and God knows who else was pulling those strings there. And as Levitt just pointed out, in those 4 years, they brought in enough fentanyl to kill every single American, and we are just not going to do that anymore. And we're also not going to be lectured by a bunch of countries that don't do jack shit as Americans die. It's as simple as that. We'll have more on that in just a second, but first, Rumble Premium. If you really want to get the most out of Rumble, upgrade to Rumble Premium. With Premium, you'll get everything ad-free and distraction-free, plus access to creators who actually stand for something. If you want to support a platform that's genuinely built on free speech and not just talking about it, this is the way. Go to rumble.com/premium/Rubin. That's rumble.com/premium/Rubin for 10% off an annual membership. Join the movement. All right, so as the Democrats side with the bad guys, they were just trying to bring over a little fentanyl. Don't kill the other guy on the boat. Throw him a life raft. It's not just the Democrats that do it. It's also their allies in the media. So now we will go to, we haven't played a clip from these ladies in a while. Yes, we're going to The View, and Sunny Hostin, the most racist, hateful person on all of your television set. Here she is implying that Pete Hegseth is committing war crimes by blowing up boats that are bringing fentanyl into America.
I can't speak to the law of it. I don't know, I'm not a geopolitical expert, but in terms of the law of it, you're right, Sarah. That is why those Army vets explained, do not follow, you do not have to follow illegal orders. You know why? Because if this is deemed to have been war crimes, which by all accounts right now, there are 7 sources that said Pete Hegseth did say kill them all, even after there were 2 survivors. What you're supposed to do under international law, you are supposed to take those fighters as war criminals, prisoners of war, and you're supposed to give them refuge, and you're supposed to take care of them, and then you are supposed to put them into a court of law.
This is so absurd. This notion, for some reason, this one drives me more crazy than almost anything right now. This thing that we keep hearing, we're hearing it a ton from moron Zamboni in New York City, and now we're hearing it from international law. International law is not a thing. It is like a unicorn, right? Like, it's just not a thing. We are bound by the laws of the United States. If you are watching this in the United States and you are a legal citizen of the United States, there is no international law that governs your life. The laws of the United States of America govern your life. Donald Trump has every right to defend the United States as he sees fit. Now, it's interesting. She's also admitting, she's calling them international fighters. So she's admitting that these people are doing some pretty terrible things. And again, we can have some debate as to what our SOP, what our standard operating procedure should be in the military in a situation like this. I think you can make that argument and also make the argument that I made earlier, which is that we're sending a signal, like we're going to blow up the boat and kill the other guys. We're going to do that a couple times because hopefully the signal is sent, and then we don't have to do that shit again. But once again, this is just Democrats and their media friends, comrades, I should say, just defending the indefensible. Why don't you? Here, I'll give you a hint, Sunny Hostin, for tomorrow's show. Sunny, on tomorrow's show, when they're telling you what to say, why don't you say, you know what, I'm not going to do the notes of the things that you hand me to say. I'm always looking down and reading things instead of telling you what's going on in my mind. How about we do a whole segment today on The View about all of the kids who have died of fentanyl? And let's do a segment the next day after that about where the fentanyl came from. But you don't want to do that, and I wonder why, Sunny Hostin. Here is White House spokesman Stephen Miller talking about Nicolas Maduro and what is going on in Venezuela.
President of Colombia is saying that Cartel of the Suns does not exist. What can you answer, and which message do you send to people in Venezuela after this indictment of Nicolas Maduro?
Well, as you know, and thank you for bringing it up, Nicolas Maduro is an indicted drug trafficker. He's indicted in federal court. He's a fugitive from justice in America. As I think you're also aware, there's a $50 million reward for the return of Nicolas Maduro. Not just him, his henchmen have also been indicted. So it is a drug cartel that is running Venezuela.
Okay. It's a drug cartel that's running Venezuela. Is that true or false? By every estimation, that is true, right? Again, nobody, even Sunny Hostin and Chuck Schumer and the rest of these ding-dongs, I don't think anyone's making the argument that they're just sending the boats over. These are fun boats. These are boats that have little ropes attached to them, and people are, on their little ships, and they're just having a blast, going over the big waves and jumping and everything. No, they are bringing drugs. This is a problem, and we are not going to take this crap anymore. By the way, earlier I mentioned that they're doing this thing in Japan, and they go into the subway and they do this. It's called the Fent Fold because it's the fentanyl fold. Do we have any pictures? Yeah, this is, well, that's not a Japanese guy, but these are real. So this is what Sunny Hostin doesn't care about. This is what Chuck Schumer doesn't care about. This is what moron Zamboni doesn't care about, and the rest. They don't mind that drugs end up on our streets. I know we can be sort of glib and dismissive when you see these pictures. These are human beings. These are someone's children. These are maybe someone's parent or brother or wife, and they have destroyed lives. destroyed lives. And for some reason, you guys don't care about that. And you're only pissed that some secondary guy on a boat that we blew up who was bringing the drugs might drown. Think about that. Interestingly, from Polymarket, in December, they polled people as when Maduro will be out by, as the pressure now, right? We've got these war carriers and warships getting close to Venezuela, and Trump's talking about the airspace and everything out. So 20% of people think that he will be out by the end of this year, December 31st, 2025. But look at that. That jumps, it more than doubles to 47% by March. So something... Polymarket, that's just basically, it's not scientific per se. It's following the trends of what people think, but it does seem like this is not going to end well for Mr. Maduro. But let's go back to the Democrats, because again, they cannot control themselves. So, the big story last week was that a bunch of Democrats created one of these ridiculous commercials where they were saying, if you're in the current member of the service, you don't have to follow illegal orders. And they never said what the illegal orders are. And when I showed you the video, I said, it's interesting because maybe they should have mentioned what they were, because all the service member aren't lawyers. Why don't you make their jobs a little bit easier? And then, of course, subsequently, a bunch of them, Slotkin and Mark Kelly, went on TV shows over the weekend, were asked what were the illegal orders, and had nothing. They had literally nothing to say. Slotkin was like, well, there could be some things in the future. That's called pre-crime. That was from Minority Report. It's not a real thing. Great movie. Tom Cruise, Everybody Runs. Here's Senator Mark Kelly. He's all over this thing, going after Hegseth, implying that he's unqualified, which is completely absurd, and a bit more go.
This guy is so unqualified for the job. I mean, think about this. He runs around on a stage talking about lethality and warrior ethos and killing people. We have the most competent, capable military this planet has ever seen by far. To do really hard jobs, let me give you all the tools you need to do something that often is an impossible mission. And instead, he runs around on a stage like he's a 12-year-old playing Army. And it is ridiculous. It is embarrassing.
Mark Kelly, I don't think you are like a completely insane leftist lunatic that hates America like some of these other Democrats. I don't think you are, but for some reason you're being dragged into this thing, and you might want to take stock of that. You're also in Arizona, a place that is not as radically blue, so you might want to watch out for your own career. But what are you talking about? The Secretary of Defense, as we used to call it, Secretary of War, him talking about our lethality of our military, that's good. Talking about the warrior ethos, that's great. Talking about killing people, he's not saying randomly kill people. He wants people to be afraid of America again. That's how you garner respect in the world. It's the most basic peace through strength. What should we do? We should all, would you prefer it the way we had it before, which is that a bunch of men in dresses are going to be up there like, don't bother us, please. That doesn't work. Please don't bother us. Where's my brooch? Anyway, here's a bit more of Senator Mark Kelly with Jake Tapper. Where's my brooch?
Once the ship starts sinking and there are survivors, I mean, the Washington Post says they were clinging to the wreckage, but whatever, there are survivors. We know there were survivors. Are you allowed to then attack the survivors?
Absolutely not. I sunk a OSA-2 missile patrol boat. It was in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m. Polnokny troop carrier in the Persian Gulf during the day, getting shot at there were 2 ships. One of them was shooting at us. No, you don't do that. Everybody knows that. That is against the Geneva Conventions.
Admiral Mitch Bradley acted, quote, well within his authority and the law. You disagree?
Well, the White House is going to have their story. Their story changes all the time. I hope that we find out more information that demonstrates that, maybe it's hard to think that this is possible, but maybe exactly what is being told here is not true, because I really care about our members of the military.
How about caring about American citizens who are dying of fentanyl? Am I being very cold today? I don't think so. I care more about Americans than I do about the drug trafficker who's on the boat that blows up. His buddy is dead and he's swimming for his life, but he was trying to bring fentanyl over. I don't care that much about that guy. So I would say there's 3 things here, right? There's the ethical issue, right? So there is some ethical issue around what do you do on this sort of second strike, leave nobody alive. We've already addressed that ethical issue. Then there is a legal issue, but again, I don't think it's an international law issue. It's an American legal issue that we can discuss. But I would say what envelopes both of those is the signal issue, and the signal issue is stop screwing with us. So Jake, I would say next time you bring Kelly on, ask him more about the fentanyl crisis in America. Ask him if it's affected him at all. Actually, it's quite big in Arizona. Like, maybe do a little of that. And why do you have so much sympathy for some guy that was trying to kill Americans, which is exactly what they were doing? Let's talk about Morgan & Morgan for a minute, and then we will jump over to New York City, where the gangs have returned. If you've ever been seriously hurt in an accident, your injury could actually be worth millions, and most people have no idea. Insurance companies love to lowball claims, offering way less than what you deserve. That's why there's Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm with over 1,000 attorneys across 50 states. They've been fighting for people for more than 30 years, and they don't settle for lowball offers. Just recently, they won $12 million in Florida, $26 million in Philadelphia, and $6.8 million in New York, all way above what insurance companies offered. And the best part, it's completely free unless you win. No upfront costs, no hidden fees. It takes only a couple minutes to see if you have a case. Did you know you can start a claim with America's largest injury law firm in just one click? It's super easy. Just go to forthepeople.com/Rubin or click the link in the description and pin comment. Have you guys ever heard of New York City? It was once the greatest city in the history of the world. It was once the home of capitalism. It represented everything that was good about America. It was actually the place where so many legal immigrants came through to make their lives better for themselves and their ancestors, and it all kind of worked. Well, it's soon turning into a third world shithole. It's had a lot of problems over the last couple of years. It's been on a slow decline. It's about to get on a much steeper decline. And Zohran, moron Zamboni, hasn't even taken office yet. He's about to in a couple weeks. But in preparation for the communist takeover of New York City, Tren de Aragua, one of my favorite transnational terrorist organizations, gangs, they are back in New York City.
The NYPD says these are suspected members of the ruthless Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, which has been infiltrating the U.S. for the last 2 years.
Then, when you fast forward, you see the same individuals where? In Times Square. So that's our concern.
The NYPD says Tren de Aragua has been making it over the border with the migrant influx and is getting established in New York.
What we do see is they are trying to grow.
The gang has gone from petty crimes like shoplifting and stealing cell phones and jewelry to all-out shootouts in the streets.
Good luck, New York. Good luck. So this guy's not even in charge yet. The gangs have been coming here for 2 years. We know they were coming in illegally. We know the degradation of the New York City Police Department. We know that they are allowing all sorts of criminality. We know about the rotating cast of characters that come in and out of jails. We know about the amount of people that moron Zamboni wants to let out of jail. So now you let some of these criminals out of jails. You've already got, there is such a freaking toxic mess that is about to descend onto that great city. Like, we're going to need the Ghostbusters. It's going to be like Ghostbusters 2. The hate and the pink ooze is going to start seeping through the cement, and we are going to need the Ghostbusters. How did that one end? They played that song in the Statue of Liberty. Like, they're going to have to do some crazy shit. That's the point. But nobody's coming. Nobody's coming to save you. And if you are saying you must leave New York City, and you must leave now, and this is all directly connected to everything that that Biden and the auto pen did, and Trump trying to clean it up. And that is why they hate Trump. So now let's jump over to CNN. We're going to show you the fun bumper, too, because here's Scott Jennings trying to help the less than bright Abby Phillips and her panel.
Over half of Americans think that the deportation process thus far in the Trump administration has been mostly unfair. That's 53%. And then 51% say that ISIS tactics have gone too far. So to Naira's point,
35 and 12 is 47. That's very close. 51 and 47 is a very close number, Abby.
Okay. Yeah, but it's also math. 51 is a larger number than 47.
Okay.
So
and it's down from 7. I'm just saying, you're making this out like everybody's upset about it. It's pretty much a 50-50 issue, and that's fine. But some people think he hasn't gone far enough.
Right. Okay. So you get it. And we've played you these videos where Abby Phillip is always saying she's trying to break conservatives out of her bubble. And it's like out of their bubble. And it's like she's the one in the bubble. Pull the numbers up again because Scott just did some basic math there. Right? Like you're close to 50-50 on this. Now, again, first off, all of these polls, well, you can see there's a 3.2% margin of error. You're already at 50-50 basically. Like, but the broader point about all of this is Donald Trump doing anything right now that he didn't promise to do? And the answer to that is obviously no. This is what he has been talking about for 10 years and largely could not accomplish in his first term where he was hampered for a million reasons and then COVID and everything else. He's doing exactly what he promised. Now, it might be that there are some people, even some who voted for Donald Trump, who are like, you know what, there's a few too many people getting caught up in this, right? Like I didn't intend my housekeeper to get caught up in this. That now, whether they're abandoning Trump is a different issue. And as I brought up yesterday, you know, they keep playing on CNN, all these two-time Trump voters are abandoning Trump. And there's just no evidence of that, right? He has 87% approval within the GOP. And it's like, okay, if you don't like Trump, where are you going? Where are you going anyway? Okay, you're going to become a Democrat? Good luck with that. But it is possible that some people think it's gone a bit too far. But I think on the previous panel there, it said something like 13% think it hasn't even gone far enough. And I think you absolutely can make an argument that we need to escalate this because we're rolling into a midterm election and Trump eventually will be a lame duck and will be hampered even further. So it seems to me the administration's doing the right thing. And I think the messaging is going to get a little stronger on this as we roll into midterms, because I do think this is a winning message. Listen to this from DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. I just met with the president. I am recommending a full travel ban on every damn country that's been flooding our nation with killers, leeches, and entitlement junkies. Our forefathers built this nation on blood, sweat, and the unyielding love of freedom, not for foreign invaders to slaughter our heroes, suck dry our hard-earned tax dollars, or snatch benefits owed to Americans. We don't want them, not one. I mean, that is some serious, freaking straightforward, you might argue over the top language, but in the midst of what is happening with the Democrat Party, where there is a party that is wildly anti-America, that is wildly anti-capitalism, that does not like the founding of our country, to the backdrop of 20 plus million people who have come in, to all of the institutions that have failed us and taught all our kids the wrong things. As I said yesterday, when your house is burning down, you don't just invite a zillion other people to be part of it, right? You might want to start cleaning things up, get the fire extinguisher. We'll fix this room up first, see if we can make sure our family members all haven't burned, blah, 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 blah. This is Donald Trump who retruthed that over on Truth. So, no. Sorry, this is another thing. So Trump on Truth wrote, welcome to Minnesota. Great job, Governor Walz. And this is Amy Mecca. This is a woman who has been warning. I mean, this lady has been on the front end of warning about the Islamization of our country for years and years and years, and she's paid a price for it. Listen to what she wrote here that Trump was resharing. The Somali state of Minnesota. Minnesota is being systematically transformed. Its people replaced, its cities turned into foreign enclaves, its future rewritten by mass migration and soaring immigrant birth rates, all by design. 130,000 new arrivals last year, tens of thousands from Somalia, Ethiopia, and Mexico. Migrant birth rates soaring while native Minnesotans flee. Crime, welfare abuse, and Islamic influence exploding. Minneapolis already holds the largest Somali population in the United States, a hub for Sharia push and radical recruitment. You can see it on display at the Somali Culture and Music Night held this weekend. So if you watched the show yesterday, I mean, we showed you many of these videos. It does not mean that every single one of those people is horrible. But if you're bringing in people who have a wildly different set of view, who only want to stay in their own little enclave, who don't want to be part of the melting pot, et cetera, over time, that literally will break down the entire system. Right? That is what will actually destroy America. America is not going to be destroyed because some rockets flew into Chicago, right? That's not going to happen. It's not going to be destroyed in a military sense that way, but it could be destroyed bottom up, that you would bring in a whole bunch of people, the culture would collapse, we'd be at each other's throats. Next thing you know, all the women are in beekeeper costumes. Look at this from N-Wokeness. Kwanli Ibram abducted a 12-year-old in Minnesota and raped her. St. Paul Islamic Center wrote a letter of community support saying he has not assimilated into non-Somali culture. So again, do you want these people? Was this guy vetted properly? I don't know. Where did this guy come from? Was he vetted properly? Who did they call? You know, this guy, he's interested in raping 12-year-old girls. You get it. You get it. Here is a Somali woman. This was going viral yesterday, talking about how she doesn't feel safe in Minnesota because of Trump, although a lot of people in her community are committing fraud.
I'm not comfortable sometimes because when I drive, when I'm sitting somewhere, not comfortable like before.
She says the president's recent focus on the Somali community is unnerving.
What he said, we've affected all communities. We know some people, they make fraud, but not all.
Late Thursday night, President Trump used a slur for people with intellectual disabilities to describe Governor Tim Walz.
All right, first up, again, as a child of the 80s, a Gen X guy here, no one means retarded as in making fun of someone with mental handicap. It was just a thing we said about stupid people, and I think it's applicable to what's going on today. Now, as to what that woman said, lady, assuming you are legal, you actually don't have anything to worry about unless you're involved in some sort of, I don't know, terrorist organization or something like that. But it is interesting that you said you know some people involved in fraud, but not all. That sounds like she knows like quite a bit of fraud people. Have you reported any of the fraud people? I don't know, maybe called in the fact that I think your representative probably, Ilhan Omar, married her brother for immigration purposes. That sounds like fraud. And Minnesota, it's getting crazy. You thought Dearborn was like the home of the insanity, but listen to this coming out of Minnesota. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison caught on tape pledging to help Somali fraudsters in exchange for campaign donations. And Elon Musk retweeted that, and he said outright criminal fraud. That's the Attorney General. You know what the Attorney General is? He's like top lawyer, right? So the top lawyer of Minnesota was basically in a bribery scheme. So where are we? Have I taken a breath on today's show? Maybe it's the fumes that are getting to me. Where are we at this point? Let's do a little Rubin Reporter reset. Things are a little wacky at the moment. But guys, as I always say, as Ron DeSantis says, decline is a choice. It does not have to be this way. We've let it go a little too far, and it's going to be on all of the sane people, that includes you watching this, to fix this thing. And I think one of the ways we fix it is to realize that we had something precious, right? We really did have something precious, and there are pockets of America that still have that precious thing. But we want to get that precious thing to scale again, right? Right now, stupidity, retardation, jihadism, communism, that's what's scaling. But how about we get decency to scale again? I saw this video a couple days ago. This is more like the type of video we would end the show with, but I think it'll set up this next segment nicely. This is from 1965, and this is at a supermarket. They're talking about how they had to go about doing business in America when things were, let's say, a little less complicated.
The first order of business is to greet the customer. Then comes an important moment of caution. Is the bottom of the cart empty? I always make certain there are no missed items that might get through unchecked. There's no such thing as an almost right in this business. If I overcharge, I cheat the customer. If I undercharge, I'm unfair to the store. Fractions mean you charge the next penny. Dropping the fraction can be costly. It might well represent the entire profit on this order.
Okay, so I think you're going to see why I'm playing that. I love showing those old things because I think it does help remind us of the way things kind of used to be. And it doesn't mean that everything was freaking perfect in 1965. But like the idea that they were putting out public service announcements where, first off, it was an honorable job to work at a grocery store, which of course it still is, right? And then you have the woman, and she's concerned about not only the customer, making sure they don't forget something, but also concerned about her boss and the company and the store, that no one's going to cheat from them, and talking about the fraction of the penny and all of those things. And that was the exchange of things, right? Imagine that woman with her beautiful Aquanet hair and everything else. Imagine that woman working at a Best Buy these days during a Summer of Love month. And she's standing at the register and some kid's running out with the 57-inch plasma and the LED and I'm starving, I need a PlayStation. Like she'd be pissed, that lady. She would not be very, very happy. So the choice is we can either have something like that where we're kind of all decent people and we're a little different in our own little way, but we all believe in the idea of the system, right? We can either do that or we could do this.
Into our studio, this is Patrick Tyson. According to investigators, Tyson poured alcohol on the floor and couch where a woman was sitting and then set it on fire. The victim told police Tyson demanded she bring him a beer and threatened to set her on fire if she didn't. When the alcohol ignited, her shirt caught fire, but authorities say it burned off. However, she was not too badly injured in that, thankfully.
Well, at least she wasn't badly injured. But I think you see the point, guys. We can keep doing these crazy stories. Believe me, there's a plethora of these types of things where random people try to burn people, urinate on them, throw them over the subway, inject them with weird stuff, rape the sister. We can do all these things. Or we could be more like the lady who was like, I want to make sure that you get all your groceries, and I also want to make sure that the boss man gets paid. Like, which seems better? And I want to show you this. We showed you this the other day, but again, I think it's worth noting as we're talking about all of this. These are three beautiful young women who are no longer with us, and what you're seeing below in this, and in some sense, this doesn't have anything to do with skin color. This has everything to do with culture. The three men who murdered those three women, 125 combined arrests. So decline is a choice. The judges who look at the rap sheets and then, oh, well, you've been in jail 18 times. You did try to burn that woman alive. Let him out one more time. I got a tea time in a half hour. I can't deal with this shit. Like, enough. And you know what also happens when you do all these bad things? You put an insane strain on the good people in the system. And there are good people in the system, our law enforcement agents and our ICE agents. There are plenty of good people trying to do a good job. There was this guy, Damian James Madison, who was a 27-year-old who shot a deputy's car in Washington. And we showed you this video, this is from a couple weeks ago, where here's now the sheriff talking about how many times they had arrested and pursued this guy. And it's like, we are making, this is the good guy. The guy we are about to show you is the good guy. And look how difficult we are making his job while we are releasing people who are killing beautiful young women.
He's got a felony warrant out of Thurston County Sheriff's Office because this is the third time we've pursued this individual in 6 months. So the last time I talked about him, I actually specifically stated that if the judges don't start taking this seriously, that someone's going to get hurt or killed. And here we are, shooting at the police. So maybe they'll take it more serious this time, but I'm not confident. Yeah, it's hard to believe this is going to end peacefully.
Okay, so you have good guys that are trying to do the right thing. But imagine you're a police officer. So imagine you're a police officer in New York City right now, right? That was in Washington, but imagine you're a police officer in New York City right now. Tren de Aragua is back. You're a sanctuary city. You know about the drugs. You know about the crime. You know that if you arrest someone, they're just going to be sent back out again. Over time, you will no longer be good at your job, and it won't be your fault. There will be no point in doing your job. And that's why the New York City Police Department, which is way bigger than most armies in the world, literally, in terms of membership, and the amount of people that are in those uniforms, that's why they're bleeding membership right now. That's why they're dropping standards, physical and mental standards, because they can't get the good guys anymore, right? They can't get people to do it anymore. Those guys are getting a bonus now in Florida. They're coming down. DeSantis has given $5,000 bonuses to well-qualified New York City police officers to come down here. So the red-blue divide is we're getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and they're getting weaker, and it's by their own choosing. Of course, another place that this is happening is Chicago, and Brandon Johnson, who is the mayor there, who simply, can I get the numbers on how many black people were shot and killed this weekend? He simply does not care how many people get killed on his streets. He only cares about going after Trump. Here he explains that jailing people is just racist.
We cannot incarcerate our way out of violence. We've already tried that, and we've ended up with the largest prison population in the world without solving the problems of crime and violence. The addiction on jails and incarceration in this country, we have moved past that. It is racist, it is immoral, it is unholy, and it is not the way to drive violence down.
You know, I'm going to really try. You might be right at some extent that we jail too many people. Maybe we do have to rethink overall jailing, but not as it comes to shooting people and raping people and the violent crimes. Like, there's not much more you can do with that. Is it possible we're jailing too many people on certain petty crimes or white-collar crimes that you can maybe get more community service out of them? Or, I don't know, maybe something, but that's obviously not what he's talking about. One thing he's not talking about also is that 11 people were shot in Chicago this past weekend, 3 killed. You're not going to know any of their names because it was likely black people shooting black people, and that doesn't fit their narrative. Nayib Bukele, who is the president of El Salvador, which was once the most violent place in the world, which is now basically the safest country in the Western world. He saw Brandon Johnson talking about that you can't incarcerate your way out of violence. And he wrote this with charts. Those are charts. He said, you can literally incarcerate your way out of violence. That's precisely why incarceration exists in the first place. And again, that's the signal. The signal. What signal is Brandon Johnson saying to people in Chicago right now? He sees the mayhem there. And the thing that he is sending out to people is, we're not even interested in jailing you, right? Versus what's going on in El Salvador. Well, they had a massive drug problem. They had a massive gang-related violence program. They had so many problems that the gangs, and I've been there a couple times, before it got cleaned up, and I had to, my brother-in-law was doing some volunteer work there, and we had to stay in a barbed wire, highly secure place. That's where basically anyone, if you were American or just not from there, you had to stay in an absurdly secure area, and you were told not to walk out and everything else because the gangs were running the streets. They were literally going to homes and they would just kick people out of their homes and then take the home. There was no police to do anything. They finally fixed that, but they did it by incarcerating people. It's not because it's not because you want to jail everybody. It's because if you don't do that, you end up punishing the good people. And that is exactly what is about to happen in New York City. Phoenix, scroll up for me a little bit here. Moron Zamboni, the incoming mayor of New York City, who is a communist with a little bit of jihad on the side. Here he is saying that he told Trump that ICE raids are cruel and inhumane, although he's going to have to suck it up because they're coming.
When I met with the president, I made very clear that these kinds of raids are cruel and inhumane, that they are raids that do nothing to serve the interests of public safety, and that my responsibility is to be the mayor to each and every person that calls this city their home. And that includes millions of immigrants, of which I am one.
But you're not an illegal immigrant, you fucktard. That's better than retard. Fucktard, that's what I'm going to say from now on. The way they conflate this and that they can never make the distinction between legal and illegal. Look, it shows, the fact that you're a citizen of the United States shows that our vetting process is not proper, right? Okay, fine. But going in, if your job, as you say, is to do the best for the people of New York City, you should be doing the best for the legal people of New York City. And that Bernie, that fucking useless old windbag, that he sits there nodding along. Bernie, you've got 3 houses. Offer one to some illegal immigrants. I'm sure some Tren de Aragua people would love to get out of the winter in New Hampshire and go to your summer home somewhere. Like, get cracking, man. But what were Bernie and Zohran doing together? Well, they were out there picketing Starbucks. That's right, because apparently bitter, dark coffee is not something that socialists are into. Listen to this. Starbucks CEO, this is from Zohran himself, Starbucks CEO Brian Nicole made $95 million last year. His workers are striking for the bare minimum. Glad to be on the right side of the picket line with them. Now, this is interesting. Leave that up for a second, Connor, because he's saying the workers of Starbucks are striking for the bare minimum. Well, we did a little checking, and it turns out that the workers at Starbucks, they get an awful lot. They have I'm going to show you some of this. I'm not going to read all of this, but they have some of the best benefits in the country for a corporation like this. They have a 401k with 100% match on the first 5%, which is almost unheard of in retail. They have 100% tuition paid upfront for ASU online bachelor's degrees. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Free drinks every shift, 30% off food merch, weekly markout for coffees and teas. They get free Spotify premium. Like, they get all of these things, but it's the bare minimum. And it's always the bare minimum because you guys just want more. Here is moron and douchebag. It.
Like so many working people across this city, these are not demands of greed. These are demands for decency. These are workers who are simply being asked to be treated with the respect that they deserve.
Okay, so they just want respect and everything else. Now, we already showed you, like, there might be some, and I have no doubt that there's some places that really take advantage of their workers and don't pay them enough and don't give them any benefits, blah, 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 blah. But Starbucks ain't one. What you are doing, obviously, by going after Starbucks, because it is a successful corporation that makes, I actually like Starbucks coffee. I like kind of darker, I know it's a little bitter for some people, but I generally like stronger coffee. 33, so the average just barista there is making about $33K, but largely that's a part-time job. It's usually an entry-level thing. But the point is Starbucks represents capitalism. So the funny part is I watched that video last night, and we were trying to figure out the show for today, and I'm watching that video, and they're there, we want to be treated fair, blah, blah, blah. And of course they want more money and all these things. And I was like, you know what, Joseph, can you find, I have no doubt it exists, can you find me some video of a robot making coffee somewhere? Because all of these people are about to be replaced. And not only did we find one, we found one from Starbucks. Here is Starbucks in South Korea. Robots, enjoy. I like that song. We could put that on the Rubin Report Party playlist. A little funk, yeah. So Starbucks right now in South Korea, 1,000 of those robots exist, and they only need 2 people to tend to them. So they can make the drinks, they can deliver the drinks and everything else. So you idiots, and for years we've been talking about this. You guys keep demanding that we artificially inflate salaries. Pay people $25 an hour. And then what happens? Burger King replaces them with iPads. They literally lose their job. Businesses close because they cannot afford to do it. Now you can make some argument that does that guy need $95 million a year? I don't know. Well, it's not my right to say how much someone is worth, right? But you guys are artificially trying to inflate wages, and then what is going to happen? You're doing it, it's dumb even if robots weren't here. It doesn't really make sense. But to the point that we are on the verge of the robots and AI replacing so many people, you guys are trying to actually accelerate it. And the reason you want to accelerate the destruction is because you want to use the destruction as proof that capitalism doesn't work, even though that's not the case. What you might want to do, Bernie and Moron, is instead of trying to burn everything down and tell us how bad capitalism is and how awful America is and how bad policing is and blah, 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 you might want to start building things, like actually provide value to people, because that is what inspires. That is what creates. I know that's not your thing, but you might want to try that. And here is Elon Musk on, well, that.
If you want to create something valuable financially, you don't pursue that. It's best to actually pursue providing useful products and services. If you do that, then money will come as a natural consequence of that, as opposed to pursuing money directly. Just like you can't sort of pursue happiness directly, you pursue things that lead to happiness. But there's not like direct happiness pursued. You do things like, I guess, fulfilling work or study or friends, loved ones, that as a result make you happy.
It's so interesting. He's doing a sort of Jordan Peterson version of what Jordan does at the psychological level. He's doing at the economic level, that you don't pursue happiness. You do things that basically provide value. You do things that are meaningful, and then you might become happy on the other side. Just pursuing happiness doesn't do anything. Right? And that's why, it's exactly why all of these people, these masked morons and these Hamas brigade idiots, it's why they are so miserable. It's why they never build anything. They're only interested in destroying things. And it's a deeply, from the Jordan perspective, it's a psychological thing. But what Elon is talking about there is that if you want to be in essence, you want to be on the adventure of life, go start doing some stuff. And then the hate, the desire to destroy, the endless desire to be out there boycotting Starbucks, which is actually doing good, doing right by people like you, it will flit away because you will have some meaning in your life. Another way to look at this is see what other good people who are creating things are doing. So this is a little lengthy, but I think it is worth reading all this because it's spectacular. There's a guy named Breezy on X who put this up. He said, "Be Shane Copeland." We will tell you a bit about Shane Copeland in just a moment, but look at this. So Shane Copeland, who is now on the front cover. There he is as a kid. He's probably, 14 years old. There he is now. He is the Prince of Prediction who runs Polymarket. We'll have more on that in a second. And look at this. Look at his track record. It's a lot of bullet points. Emailed the SEC at age 14 asking how to create new marketplaces. He didn't get a response. He showed up uninvited at Genius HQ at 16 and he got hired. He went to New York University. He then dropped out. You thought we were going to get you on that one. Try a bunch of crypto projects. Realized that none work. Still keep building. Launch Polymarket in 2020 to fix misinformation. The first market is when does New York City reopen? Expand into politics, sports, culture. Volume explodes. Regulators enter the chat. CFTC fines him $1.4 million and blocks users in 2022. The FBI raids his apartment in 2024. It seizes some devices. The media calls it unregistered gambling. He calls it political. Investigation dropped in 2024. He then acquires a CFTC licensed exchange. 1 week later, Polymarket suddenly on track for full U.S. launch. Shane walks in wearing a t-shirt and jeans and a bagel bag. Spreacher tries to buy Polymarket on the spot. ICE invests $2 billion for 25% in October of 2025. The valuation jumps to $9 billion. The college dropout becomes a billionaire at 27. The blue-eyed, mop-haired kid versus the New York Stock Exchange. American Innovation Picture. That's the one we just showed you. Billionaires pile in. Polymarket partners with NHL, UFC, DraftKings, Google Finance, and Yahoo Finance integrate. PM data, Polymarket data. Prediction markets become mainstream overnight. Critics call it unregulated gambling loophole. Supporters call it next Wall Street. Institutions prepping to plug Polymarket data into indices. 5 years after founding, 1 year after FBI raid, stands in front of the New York Stock Exchange, watches a giant Polymarket banner rise against all odds. Like, how about you try that? Kid who's out there protesting Starbucks, who probably doesn't even work at Starbucks. How about you get a job so you have something to do during the day and start thinking anyone can do anything in life? That's the secret. That's the fucking secret. Here's Shane Copeland telling Anderson Cooper about how great it is to have a company that has a $9 billion valuation.
What valuation now has Polymarket been given?
$9 billion post-money valuation.
$9 billion. Did you anticipate that?
I mean, I didn't start it to not get here, you know?
Shane Copeland is now a billionaire, at least on paper. And Polymarket, it still hasn't made any profit. It gives away its main product, its predictions, for free, and doesn't charge fees on trades.
Okay, so look, we can talk all about their business model and, there's a difference between $9 billion on paper and having it in the bank and all of those things. But the point is the kid who was nobody doing nothing, which is what most people start as. He had a dream. He pushed. He saw the way the winds were blowing. He decided to do something and the market found value in that. And that is how you build. And then he can go on to the real adventure, which is what Jordan and Elon are talking about. Then you can go on and find happiness because you started doing something valuable. And then the connections that will be made throughout your life and the world will be literally mind-blowing. And I can tell you that from my own experience. Here he is watching the Polymarket banner rise at the New York Stock Exchange. My Way. It's probably my favorite song. You got to get the lyrics from Sinatra. That is what the American dream is all about. And I can tell you guys a smaller version of that is that when I started Locals, I saw a problem in the market, right? I saw censorship from big tech. I wanted to create something that would allow creators to have a one-on-one relationship with their audience without having to go through big tech. We created something for me. We then spun it off for a few other creators. We got some investment. It took years and years. There were years, 2020 and 2021, I was doing way more work trying to build Locals than I could even for the show. And there was no profit. There was no money to be made. There was no salary that I took. I was putting in my own money and it was blood, sweat, and tears. And half the time, I'd spend literally 8 hours a day, Zoom call, trying to raise funds for something, having no idea if it was ever going to work. And then eventually, not only did it start working, but then we merged with Rumble, and then Rumble went public and I was able to be at NASDAQ as that button was pushed. It's a slightly smaller version of that, but it's because we created something with value. I didn't just sit there and bitch and moan and complain and pick at Starbucks. I went out and did something, and you can do that too. Speaking of doing cool things, I'm going to Mar-a-Lago tonight because there is a PragerU event that I will be doing with Glenn Beck and my old friend Larry Elder, who I have not seen in a year or two, and I'm very excited for that. So the three of us will be talking. I think there'll probably be a few other people there. So who knows? Maybe someone watching this will be there. So we'll do an abbreviated post-game show, and then we'll see everybody else tomorrow. RubinReport.locals.com. 30 seconds. Ciao.